rule of thirds is the most popular composition technique, where you have 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines, dividing the frame into 9 equal rectangles. And the rule simply states to place your subject of interest into one of the 4 intersections. And voila, you're a pro photographer now. But today we're going to take a look at how you can break the rules, because you know what they say. Girls only date the bad guys. While I take you on this hike, I want to share a concept that came about called the Chesterton's fence. Imagine you're walking around and come across a fence in the middle of nowhere that's blocking your path. What do? Do you break it or do you just leave it alone? And the point is to not make your decision without understanding the principles behind prior decisions. Or simply put, do not break the rules without understanding the rules. Breaking the rules without understanding it can have consequences. For example, if you break the rule of thirds without understanding the intentions, can make your photos appear amateur or taken by a beginner. So I actually tried researching the origin of the rule of thirds, but I didn't find anything online. Every article just says to follow it, but to me, this is my own interpretation of why it works. When you're looking at a scene or an image, your eyes would want some closure or some visual flow as to where you should be resting them. And by giving that asymmetry of placing a dominant subject on the left or right third of your frame, will give some signal to your eyes that you should be placing your attention on that part of the image. It doesn't work quite as well if you place your subject at the center of an asymmetrical scene. Do you pay attention to the left part or the right part of the image? In these examples, these aren't really the worst photos out there, but placing the subject in the center with all that asymmetry around makes things compete and the balance feels tipped off. The same can also be said by the anticipation of movement in the frame. If you place your subject facing the direction of travel that they are going to and giving them some breathing space, you allow your eyes to follow along their journey throughout the image as well. To illustrate in these sample photos, we allow the viewer to follow along the anticipated movement of the subject along the remaining part of the image as they face towards the longer edge of the frame with evidence of motion. Whereas in these examples where the subjects were already in the near center, it is ambiguous whether we look at where the subject came from or look towards the direction they are going to. Now you can see why the rule of thirds is very popular, because it's very simple, easy to apply, and easy to understand. And once you understand it, you're going to just start seeing it everywhere, just like in the movies. And if you want to use it, it's going to be a very useful guide. Most cameras these days will have that rule of thirds overlay, even your smartphone, which if you want to use it, you can just go to your camera settings. So right now I'm doing this hike in Hong Kong called the Lo Fu Tau Trail, which in English, the Tiger Head Peak. And I don't know, does it really look like a tiger head? To me, it doesn't really, but it is what it is. But I chose this trail today because I think there's a lot of potential compositions. So I thought that it's a good day to talk about compositions. So now, why do we want to break the rule of thirds? Basically, I needed a video idea, so subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. There are a couple of things that I dislike about the rule of thirds. The first one is that it's called a rule, and because of that, it might make you feel a bit lazy with taking your compositions, because you have that mindset that you always need to abide by it. And if you simply take every photo of yours as the rule of thirds, then all of your shots will appear the same. And the second one is because you're forcing yourself to shoot in the rule of thirds. Well, just because you applied it doesn't mean you're always going to take away a nice photo. Well, I don't really know if those points made any sense, but I find that me finding ways to break these composition rules sort of helps with my creativity, because it does make me shoot more with intention. Examples of when I break the rule of thirds. For example, you're faced with a scene with a lot of symmetry or reflections in them. The rule of thirds may not be the best choice of composition because you want to emphasize that arrangement, and placing your subject in the center of a symmetrical background may work better in these cases. And the same can be said when you're faced with a situation of a lot of negative or empty space in the background, because in these cases you tend to emphasize the isolation around your subject, and it can always be argued that wherever you place the subject, it's going to have the same narrative. This was a highly experimental composition that I took advantage of the conditions, and I wanted to emphasize how the peaks were being swallowed by the fog. By placing myself in it along with how I am diminishing against the background will show my scale along with this narrative. I think it wouldn't work quite as well if I didn't push this small island to the near bottom of the frame. Another instance on when I break the rule of thirds is when I take portrait-orientated shots, because I think in this aspect ratio, your eyes will tend to travel through the image in a vertical manner. And I think in these cases, placing your subject in the center will work out a bit better sometimes than placing them in the rule of thirds grid. These are the hiking expectations versus reality. This may not be the best image, but compositionally, because of the leading line from the trail, you can place me anywhere along it and it will still work. Placing myself within the path and centered with a pop of color contrast against the greens and fog makes it very clear to keep your attention to myself and my journey towards the eerie fog. So this is a bit awkward. My vlog camera battery says it's battery exhausted even though it's not. So I'll just finish the last part at home. See you there. Personally, I don't use the rule of thirds as a full-on composition technique, but more as a visual guide as to how I partition my image. The simplest example is where I place the horizon, especially in landscape photography, where sometimes we want to showcase more of the foreground, but in some we want to emphasize the drama that's happening in the sky, which can be a lot more interesting. For this shot, it's in portrait to make you travel through it vertically. The sky has no detail, so it was placed at the upper third with more details placed around the rest. I also like how you have the tonal range from the blacks and the shadows further fading away to the whites. In cases when I want to fill the frame, I think of the 9 rectangles formed by the rule of thirds grid as buckets that I fill. For example, in this shot, I didn't necessarily apply the rule of thirds, but simply used it in a way that there is detail in each of the buckets, spreading the visual weight across the frame for more balance. Hopefully this video helped you understand and enable you to deconstruct the rule of thirds. Obviously, it's a great guide, but don't feel like you're forced to use it all the time. And if you enjoyed this video, why don't you click on this one? I think you'll enjoy it too. So see you there. Thanks for watching.